Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into the world of Bob Camblin today. An artist, I'm realizing, was way more than meets the eye.
Yeah, definitely not your average artist from what I've been reading.
No kidding. We've got some pieces of his biography and a book about Zen, art, enlightenment, the whole shebang.
Sounds like we're in for a wild ride.
Oh, yeah. We're going to try and figure out who he was, what his art was all about, and how it all connects to, well, everything: art history, philosophy, you name it.
A tall order, but I'm game if you are.
Absolutely. Camlin apparently said he wanted to remake Goya for the 20th century.
Ambitious, to say the least.
Right. And then there's this thing called draw writing. Never heard of it before this. Plus, he was really into the I Ching, the ancient Chinese text.
It's all connected somehow. I can feel it.
All right, so first things first, who was this Bob Camblin?
Well, from what I'm gathering, he wasn't concerned with money, just dedicated to his art. The biography describes him as living his life like a story.
Sounds like he was a walking, talking work of art himself.
Yeah. Exactly, completely dedicated to his craft.
And that dedication, it shows in his journey. He starts in the 1950s, creating art with a strong social message. We're talking bold outlines, flat colors, kind of like a visual protest.
Right, and his influences at that point, artists like Cremoni, they were all about using these fragmented figures to explore social issues. They weren't afraid to tackle the tough stuff head on.
So he wasn't shying away from controversy right from the get-go. Then he wins a Fulbright and spends time in Italy, just soaking up the art scene there.
Oh, yeah, and you can imagine him, wandering through the Uffizi Gallery, surrounded by masterpieces,
Yeah.
or even descending into the Capuchin catacombs, those eerie underground chambers decorated with, well, skeletal remains.
Oh, that's heavy stuff. Being surrounded by all those bones, you got to think about life and death a little differently, right?
For sure. And you start to see this shift in his art after that. He's still using those bold lines, but there's more detail now, more depth. He even creates these like large-scale drawings, sometimes with these intentional corrections in them, almost like he's inviting us to question, what we're seeing and how we see it. There's one piece, The Descent from the Cross, that really captures this.
Sounds like Italy was a major turning point for him, artistically and, well, maybe even existentially. Then what? I mean, he didn't just stop there.
Right? So no, not at all. Camlin was constantly evolving. In the 1960s, he kind of blends the poetic style of Hugo van der Goes, a Flemish painter, known for his intricate details and spiritual symbolism, with the raw emotional power of Goya. And I love this detail. Even the paper he used during this period has like aged over time. It's taken on these warm beige tones that make the work even more evocative.
So the art itself is like aging and changing, becoming something new. That's wild.
It is. It's incredible. But his biggest shift seems to have come in the 1970s when he moved to Houston.
Ah, yes. Houston. That's where things get a little, shall we say, experimental.
He goes all in on experimentation, blending impressionism, surrealism, cubism, you name it. He's trying it. It's like he was trying to blow people's minds, tap into the mystical and subconscious.
Mixing and matching styles like a mad scientist of art. What was driving this urge to break all the rules, do you think?
From what I'm reading, he was fascinated by the idea of blowing our minds, pushing the boundaries of what art could be, maybe even reflecting the cultural shifts of the time. This, sense of expanding consciousness and questioning everything.
Okay, now I'm really curious about these secret images you mentioned earlier. That's where it gets juicy.
Oh, yeah, this is where things get interesting. So imagine Camlin's paintings as these like visual puzzles. He layers images and symbols in ways that aren't obvious at first. You have to look closely. And sometimes, people live with his art for years before something clicks and they see something completely new.
Hold on, you mean there are things like hidden in plain sight in his paintings? Like you could be looking at a Camblin for years and not even know what's really there.
That's the idea. The book actually calls it Stratagems Beyond Definite Perception, which is quite a mouthful. But I think what Camlin was getting at is that meaning isn't always fixed. It can shift, change, based on how we see things. He even suggested that viewers use their own Gestalt psychologist to fill in the blanks, to bring their own interpretations to the table, which makes sense considering he was a huge fan of Sigmund Freud, who was all about the power of the subconscious, and Giorgio de Chirico, who, created these strange, dreamlike landscapes.
So it's not just about what Camblin intended, it's about what we, the viewers, bring to the experience. It becomes a conversation.
A dialogue.
But that still doesn't tell us what we should be looking for. What are these hidden meanings all about?
Well, there are recurring symbols, puppets, scarecrows, skulls, each one pointing to these deeper themes: metamorphosis, life cycles, the human condition. There are also nods to other artists he admired, like Matthias Grunewald, whose work often depicted these intense religious scenes with dramatic lighting, distorted figures. It's all very layered.
I'm sensing a pattern here. It's like he's using these symbols to connect us to something bigger than ourselves, some kind of shared human experience.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Camblin also had a playful side. He didn't want art to be this, super serious, pretentious thing. There's a quote where he says, "I don't consider art as heavy. However, if you think it's funny, I'll get serious. And if you think it's serious, I'll make a joke of it."
He sounds like my kind of guy, so it's okay to laugh even when contemplating life and death and all that.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of Camblin's work. It's intellectually stimulating, but it's also accessible. It invites you to think, to feel, and even to laugh.
It's like he's not taking himself too seriously, but he is taking his art seriously, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. But we need to talk about the second source you mentioned, the book about Zen.
Right, right, because that's where things get really interesting. The book suggests that art can be a portal to heightened awareness. It encourages us to view art not just with our eyes, but with our whole being,
Yeah.
to be present, open to new experiences,
It's like taking a deep breath and stepping into a different way of seeing.
a different way of experiencing.
Exactly.
And I'm starting to see how Camblin's work fits into this. Instead of just admiring his paintings for their technical skill or their beauty, we're being invited to engage with them on a deeper level, to contemplate their meaning, how they resonate with us personally.
Exactly. It's not just about decoding the symbols. It's about allowing them to speak to us, to trigger memories, emotions, and perhaps even, inspire us to see the world in a new light. It's like entering into a dialogue with the artwork, what they call an ekphrastic dialogue.
Okay, break that down for me. Ekphrastic dialogue. What exactly does that mean?
It's a fancy way of saying that the viewer and the artwork are having a conversation.
Got it. So I'm not just passively observing, I'm actively responding, interpreting, creating meaning. It's a two-way street.
That's it.
The art speaks to us, and we, in turn, speak back to it through our interpretations, our reflections.
Right. And that's where the Zen influence comes in even more. Zen encourages us to approach experience with a beginner's mind, to let go of preconceived notions and simply observe.
Which is exactly what Camblin seems to be encouraging us to do with his art, to approach it with a sense of openness, curiosity, to allow ourselves to be surprised by what we discover.
I think you've hit the nail on the head.
So to kind of sum this up, we have Bob Camblin, an artist who is not only technically skilled, but also deeply philosophical. He was influenced by art history, psychology, spirituality, and he wasn't afraid to challenge conventions, to play with our perceptions, to invite us to look beyond the surface.
And all of this is tied together by his fascination with the concept of metamorphosis, this idea that everything is in a constant state of change, transformation.
Which made sense considering all the changes he went through in his own life.
Definitely. And that's something we'll explore more in part 2 of this deep dive. So until then.
Keep those creative fires burning, everybody. It's amazing how Camblin's art evolved over time. I mean, it really does mirror his own journey, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, think about those early pieces. Bold outlines, flat colors, almost like a visual shout,
Mhm.
a direct response to the social injustices of the time. He wasn't messing around.
Yeah. And then after Italy, those bold lines, they kind of soften, give way to more intricate details, shadows. The whole mood shifts, becomes more contemplative.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Those Renaissance masters, the Capuchin catacombs, it all seeps into his work as this whole new layer of depth.
It's like his art matured right alongside.
Right. Like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon.
Yeah.
Metamorphosis in action.
Perfect analogy. And that transformative energy, it just keeps rippling through his whole career, doesn't it? He goes from social commentary to exploring the mystical, blending styles, experimenting with new techniques.
He was never content to stay in one place, was he? Always pushing forward, shedding old skins, reinventing himself.
Embracing change.
Embracing change. And that's where the I Ching comes in. The ancient Chinese text he was so fascinated by. It's all about cyclical change, the ebb and flow of life, how everything is interconnected and, constantly transforming.
Okay, so the I Ching isn't just some random exotic element he threw in there. It's actually a key to understanding how he saw the world.
Precisely. The I Ching is based on the idea that change is inevitable and that by understanding the natural cycles of life, we can navigate those changes with more grace and wisdom. And you see those ideas reflected in his art.
It's not just about Camblin's personal journey. It's about tapping into those larger universal forces that are shaping everything around us all the time. So those recurring images we talked about, puppets, scarecrows, skulls, They're like windows into those deeper themes.
Exactly. They're not just random elements, they're symbols, each one loaded with meaning.
Okay, let's break them down then. Those puppets, I have to admit, they creep me out a little. What was Camlin going for with those?
Puppets, well, they represent control and manipulation. They move according to someone else's will.
Yeah.
Their actions are dictated by an external force. It's a pretty powerful image.
Especially when you connect it to his earlier work, the focus on social protest. Like how societal pressures or political agendas can make us feel like puppets dancing on strings.
That's exactly it. Remember how Camblin wanted to remake Goya for the 20th century? Well, Goya was a master at exposing hypocrisy and corruption. Maybe Camblin was doing the same thing, using those puppets to represent, the forces that manipulate and control us, whether they're social, political, or even psychological.
And those forces are still at play today, aren't they? Maybe not literal puppet masters, but definitely forces trying to control our thoughts, our actions. It's kind of unsettling when you think about it.
It is, and that's what makes Camblin's work so timeless. It speaks to those universal human experiences, those struggles with power, control, the search for freedom.
All right, let's move on to scarecrows then. They've always struck me as kind of melancholy, standing alone in the fields like that.
Yeah, they do have a certain sadness about them, don't they?
Yeah, like they're trying to be strong, but deep down they're vulnerable, at the mercy of the elements.
That's a great observation. Scarecrows often symbolize that very thing, vulnerability and fragility. They're supposed to protect crops, but ultimately they're powerless against the forces of nature. Standing exposed, subject to wind, rain, time, they embody that feeling of being at the mercy of forces beyond our control, which I think we can all relate to.
Right. Who hasn't felt like a scarecrow at some point in their life, just trying to hold it together, weathering the storm?
Exactly. And maybe that's what Campbell was tapping into. That shared human experience, that sense of vulnerability, impermanence. And those themes, they tie right back to the I Ching, which reminds us that change is constant and that even in the face of impermanence, there's beauty and resilience.
He's saying life can be tough, but we find ways to adapt, to keep going. There's poetry in that, in the way we bend without breaking.
You're really getting it.
Okay, now for the big one. Skulls. They always make me think about death, you know? The end of the line.
It's the ultimate symbol of mortality, isn't it?
Yeah. But you said earlier that skulls can also represent transformation and rebirth. I'm not sure I follow that.
It's a fascinating paradox, for sure. In a lot of cultures, skulls are seen not just as symbols of death, but as vessels of the spirit, containers of wisdom and knowledge. They represent that whole cycle of life, death, and regeneration.
So in Camlin's work, a skull might not just be about the end, it's about what comes after, the potential for new beginnings.
Precisely. And it brings us right back to metamorphosis. Just like a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly, death can be seen as a transformation, a shedding of the old to make way for the new.
Don't be afraid of the end. It's just another stage in the journey, another opportunity for change, for growth.
You're nailing it. And
Yeah.
think about how this connects to the I Ching, which emphasizes that cyclical nature of existence. The constant interplay of yin and yang, light and shadow, life and death. It's all connected.
It's incredible how all these different threads, art, history, Eastern philosophy, personal experiences, they all weave together in Camblin's work. It's like this rich tapestry of meaning.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think that's what makes his work so compelling. He's not giving us answers. He's inviting us to explore these big questions, to find our own meaning within the mystery.
He's giving us clues, these symbols and themes we can use to unlock the secrets of his art, and maybe even the secrets of ourselves.
And that process of exploration, it aligns with the Zen principle of direct experience. Camblin isn't telling us what to think. He's inviting us to engage with his art on our own terms, to let it spark our own insights, reflections.
See for yourself, experience it, feel it, and let it guide you on your own path.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that sense of awareness of the artwork and of our own inner landscape. And as we do that, we might find that Camblin's art becomes a mirror, reflecting back to us our own hopes, our fears, our aspirations.
It's really something how one artist's work can connect to so many different ideas, traditions, from Western art history to Eastern philosophy. It's all there.
It's all connected.
Camblin's art, it's not just about aesthetics. It's about engaging with life's big questions, finding our place in the grand scheme of things.
And it's about transformation, metamorphosis. That idea that things are always changing, evolving. It's a theme that runs through all of his work.
I'm sure we'll be circling back to that idea as we continue to explore Camblin's world, especially as we delve into his deed raw writing.
Oh, definitely. Can't wait to uncover those mysteries.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Camblin's paintings, his influences, those hidden meanings, the Zen connection. But there's still this whole draw writing thing we haven't really explored.
Yeah, draw writing, that's where things get really, really interesting.
Because it's like, what even is that? It sounds like something he just made up.
He kind of did.
Uh,
Imagine blending calligraphy, drawing, and haiku poetry, all in one art form. That's draw writing in a nutshell.
it's like a secret code or something, a lost language. And it's interesting that he started creating these pieces when he moved to the Oregon coast in the 1990s.
Right, maybe there's a connection there. The biography mentions his studio overlooking the Pacific Ocean, and it kind of became this hub of creative energy for him.
I can see that. The vastness of the ocean, the rugged coastline, it's all very, well, transformative.
Exactly. It's like the perfect setting for an artist who is so obsessed with change and impermanence. And his output was incredible. We're talking thousands of draw writing pieces. Sometimes he even used them as kindling to start his fire.
Wait, really? He burned his art.
Apparently so. It speaks to this detachment he had from material possessions,
Yeah.
like the creative process was what mattered, not the end product.
It's a very Zen attitude, isn't it? Letting go of attachments, focusing on the present moment.
It is very much in line with Zen philosophy.
But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, maybe we should back up a bit. What exactly is haiku poetry? For those of us who, didn't major in ancient Japanese literature.
Right, good point. So
Mm.
think of haiku like a snapshot of a moment in time. But instead of a camera, you're using words and images.
Mm.
It's this form of Japanese poetry that combines a simple, often evocative image with a short verse, usually just a few lines.
So it's about capturing the essence of something, a feeling, a scene, an experience in a way that's both visual and poetic.
Exactly. And Camblin takes that concept and runs with it, blends it with his own unique style of drawing and calligraphy, creates this whole new language of visual poetry that kind of transcends traditional boundaries.
Which, again, ties back to what we were saying about Camblin always pushing the boundaries, mixing and matching styles and influences. It's like the writing was the culmination of all those explorations, a way to bring everything together in this new form of expression.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like writing became this perfect vehicle for him to explore all those themes we've been talking about. Metamorphosis, impermanence, the interconnectedness of all things.
All right, so we've got the what of drawer writing, but what about the content? What was he actually writing and drawing about?
Well, a lot of the themes are very similar to what we see in his paintings. The natural world, his own inner landscape, those universal questions about life, death, and transformation. He also drew inspiration from the wisdom traditions that fascinated him, like, Zen and the I Ching.
So all those threads we've been talking about, they're all woven into his drawer writing as well, creating this like multi-layered tapestry of
They're
meaning.
all collected.
And I'm guessing there are those hidden meanings and secret images lurking in these pieces too.
You bet. Just like with his paintings, Camblin wanted viewers to actively engage with his draw writing, to ponder its meaning, to draw their own conclusions.
So it's that ekphrastic dialogue again, that back and forth between the art and the observer.
Exactly. It's a journey of discovery, a process of uncovering meaning, and maybe even connecting with something deeper within ourselves, which, again, goes back to those Zen principles we were talking about.
It's amazing to me how Camblin was able to weave together all these different threads, art history, philosophy, spirituality, and create something so unique, so personal, so, I don't know, so him.
He was one of a kind, that's for sure. An artist who is constantly evolving, pushing boundaries, challenging us to see the world in a new way.
And maybe that's the biggest takeaway here. The idea that we should embrace our own creative journeys, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop searching for those secret images that lie just beneath the surface of things.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think Camblin would approve.
So, what's Bob Camblin's legacy? If you had to sum it up in a few words.
He was an artist who taught us to see the world with new eyes, to embrace the transformative power of art, and to never stop searching for those hidden meanings that are all around us if we just know where to look.
And maybe, by engaging with his art, we might just uncover a few hidden meanings within ourselves as well.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? It's a journey that never really ends.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our journey for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin.
It's been a pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep those creative fires burning. We'll see you next time.